My brother forced me to sign the mortgage papers while my sister-in-law cheered him on, so I gathered evidence and taught them a lesson they never saw coming. Hi, my name's Talia. They told people I was unstable, that I'd imagined it all, that I wasn't really family. But what do you do when your own brother, your blood, stands over you with clenched fists, and your sister-in-law says, "Do it, Daniel"? And her just because you won't sign away your father's house? What happens when the house you grew up in, the one your father built with his bare hands, becomes a battlefield? They erased me from the family photos, the will, the memories. But the question that still keeps me up at night is, how long had they planned it? And what would have happened if I had signed? Would I still be here to tell you this? I hadn't heard from Daniel in nearly 4 months. Not a call, not a text, not even a forwarded holiday email. So when his message popped up with the subject line "Family Meeting Urgent," I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before opening it. He wanted me to come to the old house, the one Dad built, the one we were all supposed to protect. It read, "Please come by Tuesday at 5 p.m. Vera and I will explain." There was no "How have you been?" or "Hope you're doing okay." Just that line, no warmth, no brother. I stared at the screen a while longer, debating. I told myself it was just a conversation, one meeting. I could sit, listen, maybe remind them I'd helped pay property taxes the year Dad got sick. I still had the receipts. I found the manila folder buried under months of unpaid invoices and tucked it into my work bag. Springfield in June was sticky, the kind of humid where your skin remembers the air long after you've walked through it. I stood outside the house for a full minute before knocking. It still smelled like my childhood, even from the porch, cedar and old screen doors, a whiff of lemon oil from the wood Dad used to polish every Saturday. Inside, Daniel was pacing. Vera sat at the dining table where Dad once carved his initials into the wood. There was a man I didn't recognize, clean-cut, wearing a tie with no personality. "Have a seat," Vera said, gesturing to the only empty chair. Her voice was sweet in that way syrup turns bitter when it's been burned. Daniel nodded stiffly. "This won't take long." There were 3 cups of coffee on the table. "None for me." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Rowan, we're here to discuss an urgent adjustment to the mortgage." I blinked. "Mortgage?" Vera slid a folder across the table, the same casual way she'd once passed me a salad bowl at Thanksgiving. "We need your signature on this to help refinance. The house is under strain, and we're barely staying afloat." The paper was thick, legal, a notary seal embossed on one corner, and at the bottom, faint but unmistakable, was my father's signature. Only it wasn't right. The tilt was off, the spacing uneven. My stomach turned. Did Dad sign this before he passed? I asked, my voice catching. Vera didn't blink. "He agreed to it. You know how he was always about the family." Daniel wouldn't look at me. I turned to him. "Did he sign this, Daniel?" He rubbed his forehead. "Come on, Talia. You always overthink everything. This is for all of us." I didn't touch the pen. Vera leaned forward. "It's just paperwork. You're not really in a position to delay this, are you? You don't even live here." My heart pounded in my ears. I looked down at my hands, trembling in my lap. I remembered the way Dad used to fold napkins when he was nervous. "I need time to think." "There is no time," Vera snapped. "If you don't sign today, we lose our chance." I stood, the chair scraping the floor behind me. "I'm not signing anything today." Their silence followed me out the door. The next day, I went to Dad's memorial, one Daniel and Vera had organized without asking me. It was held in a community hall downtown. They gave me a program to pass out at the entrance. I flipped through it once, not a single mention of me. The slideshow began as people filed in, sipping punch from plastic cups. Images of Daniel and Vera with Dad, barbecues, Christmas mornings, even the hospital bed he died in, Vera's hand on his shoulder, Daniel at his side. I wasn't in a single one. I stood at the back, a paper cup in my hand, throat dry as bone. At the open mic portion, I walked toward the front. I didn't have a speech, just a story about the time Dad and I tried to fix the lawnmower together, how we ended up covered in grease but laughing. I reached for the microphone. Vera stepped in. "Let's keep this about Dad," she said gently but firmly, taking the mic from my hand. There were polite murmurs. I returned to the back, my legs barely holding me up. That night, back in my rented room on the other side of town, I sat on the floor with an old photo album. There I was, 7 years old, sitting on Dad's lap in front of the fireplace, my face tilted up to him like he hung the moon. I pressed my fingers over his face. "You still see me, don't you?" I whispered. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I opened the drawer next to my bed and pulled out the folder I'd brought to the meeting, the one with receipts, tax notices, even the utility bills I'd covered after Mom died. I opened another box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old bank slips, printouts, and a sticky note yellowed with age. Mom's handwriting looped across the top, "You are the quiet in this house. Never forget your steadiness." I stared at it for a long while, the kind of stillness that makes the night louder. Maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe they just wanted me to believe I was. I slid the folder back into my bag, but I wasn't sure yet whether I was keeping proof or keeping hope. By the time I could fully process the sound of Mrs. Rehnquist's voice shouting from across the fence, my body had already gone still. I wasn't unconscious, not exactly. I just couldn't move. It was like my limbs had disconnected from everything else. But my hearing was sharp, hyper-focused. I could hear the door vibrating on its hinges, shouting, more footsteps, and then the unmistakable clatter of a screen door being kicked open from the outside. I remember thinking, so this is what it takes for someone to see me. They saw the blood. They saw the bruises. They saw the mortgage papers strewn across the kitchen floor, crumpled but unsigned. Everything after that moved like fog, blurry, jarring, and slow all at once. I must have been carried because the next thing I remember was the hardness of a gurney under my spine and the cool click of a seatbelt being fastened over me. A paramedic's voice kept calling my name like it was a question, "Talia. Talia Rowan, can you hear me?" I wanted to answer. I did, but everything in me hurt inside and out. I wasn't sure if I could even whisper without splitting open. Somewhere between the house and the hospital, I drifted, not asleep, not awake. It was more like I was hovering just outside of myself, watching everything through a thin veil. When I came to again, I was in a hospital bed with a blanket tucked so tight around me it felt like a strap. My mouth was dry, my lips were cracked, and my wrist, God, my wrist, throbbed with a pulse of its own. There was a nurse with kind eyes, freckles, and a voice that said, "You're safe now," with such steadiness I almost believed her. But safety to me had always been conditional, temporary, dependent on someone else's mood. She checked my made notes on a chart, and told me someone had called emergency services, a neighbor, that I'd been found with visible injuries, that the police were involved, that there would be questions. Then she left, and for the first time in a very long time I was alone in a room where no one wanted anything from me. Not my signature, not my silence, not my absence. It felt unfamiliar. An hour later, the door creaked open again and in walked Daniel. I froze. Everything inside me tensed. I couldn't lift my arms, bruised, bandaged, but I felt every nerve in my body recoil as if bracing for another blow. But Daniel didn't raise his hand. He didn't even raise his voice. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. "You should have just signed," he said, like it was the most logical sentence in the world. I didn't answer. He looked around the room at the machines, the sterile lighting, the bruises he'd helped paint across my skin. "You made this ugly," he muttered, turning to leave. That's when I finally found my voice. "No, Daniel, you did." He paused, one step from the door, but he didn't look back. He just walked out like he was late for something more important. I stayed in the hospital overnight. The police came, took statements, photographs, asked me to recount what happened. I told them everything, not just about the attack, but about the papers, the pressure, the months of manipulation that led up to it. I told them about Vera, her voice, her command, the words that still echoed in my skull, "Do it, Daniel. End her." They nodded, wrote things down, said they would look into it. The next morning, I was released with a splint on my wrist, butterfly stitches above my eyebrow, and a folder full of discharge instructions. Marvin was the one who picked me up. He didn't ask questions, just opened the car door, turned down the radio, and drove me back to my tiny rented room like nothing had happened. But something had. Something massive had cracked inside me. I didn't cry. Not then. Not even when I lay on my own bed, smelling the lavender laundry detergent I'd used 2 days before the meeting that changed everything. I stared at the ceiling for hours. And then, almost mechanically, I reached for my shoulder bag, the one I'd brought to that meeting, the one they hadn't taken. Inside, the folder was still intact, pages wrinkled, some stained red at the corner, my blood, probably. I unfolded the documents slowly: utilities, tax slips, letters I'd kept from my father, and at the very bottom, folded into quarters, was a handwritten letter. The ink had smudged slightly, like someone had touched it with damp fingers, but the writing was unmistakably his, my dad's. "If you're reading this," it began, "then I'm gone. I want you to know the truth about the house. It was never just a structure. It was the only place I ever felt proud. And you, Talia, you were always the one who showed up, even when you didn't have to. Don't let anyone take that from you. You deserve to be here." I read it once, then again, then again. By the fourth reading, the tears came, not because I was broken, but because somewhere in all that mess, in all that noise, my father's voice had found me again. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my small kitchen table with a notepad and a pen and began listing everything I could remember. Every comment Vera had made, every change to the mortgage, every time Daniel had brushed me off, called me overly sensitive, told me I was lucky to still have a roof. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to sign my name to anything except my own story. I didn't know what time it was when they finally loaded me into the ambulance. I was awake, sort of floating in and out. The bright flash of overhead lights flickered against the windows as we pulled away from the house. I remember the gentle jolt as the tires hit the curb. One of the paramedics placed a blanket over me, but even under it I was cold. Vera's face flashed in my mind, not frantic, not remorseful, just bored, like she was watching a rerun she already knew the ending to. If Daniel had hesitated, I didn't see it. His voice was still in my ears, raised, angry, as if I had done something unspeakable, as if I had pushed them to this. "You're safe now," the paramedic said quietly beside me. She was probably around my age, maybe younger. Her voice had a softness to it, but I couldn't quite accept it. I'd heard those words before, and they never lasted. The next few hours were a blur of antiseptic smells, clipped voices, and mechanical beeps. A nurse adjusted my fore while another examined the bruising on my arms and face. My ribs ached when I tried to breathe too deeply. I could feel the crust of dried blood along my lip. No one said much beyond the necessary questions. "What's your name? Do you know where you are? Who did this to you?" I answered slowly, deliberately. "Daniel Huxley, my brother." The detective who showed up was polite. He didn't rush me. He didn't doubt me, but he didn't promise anything either. He took notes, nodded at the nurse, and told me they'd do what they could. I'd heard that line before, too. Later that evening, someone brought in a visitor, my mother. She walked in wearing her usual cardigan, the same one she wore to church on Easter. Her expression was unreadable, blank in a way that made me colder than the room already was. She stood beside the bed but didn't take my hand. "You shouldn't have provoked him," she said softly, almost like she was reciting a prayer. My throat tightened. "He hit me." Her gaze didn't shift. "Family fights don't belong in courtrooms. Family doesn't beat each other over paperwork." She turned away, looked out the window. "You've always been too dramatic, Talia. You take things too personally." It hurt more than the bruises, more than the cracked rib. I watched her walk out without so much as a touch or goodbye. The next morning, I asked the nurse if someone could bring me a few personal items from my rental room. I didn't need much, just my small box from the closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. It was the only thing I'd carried with me when I moved out after Dad's funeral. That afternoon, my friend Lorna showed up with it. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me gently, placed the box on the bedside table, and squeezed my shoulder before leaving. When the room finally quieted down, I reached for the box. It was just as I remembered: faded edges, a crack in the corner, a small butterfly sticker from when I was 12 still clinging to the lid. Inside were trinkets, an old keychain from high school, a photo of Dad holding me at the county fair, and a tattered Bible. The spine was loose, the pages yellowed. I opened it without much thought, and that's when the folded letter fell out. The paper had creases so deep it nearly tore when I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's. Talia, it began. If you're reading this, I'm not around anymore. I hope you found this on your own. I didn't want to burden you with more than I already left behind. But I need you to know this house was always meant for you. Not because I loved you more, but because you stayed. You showed up. When others ran, you stayed. You deserve this home. You deserve to be seen. Don't let them erase you. I read it once, then again, and again. By the fifth reading, I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears came, not loud or heaving, just quiet streams down my face, soaking into the hospital gown like salt into cotton. He had seen me, even when I thought I was invisible, even when my own brother and mother treated me like an afterthought. And now, even from beyond, he was still protecting me. That night, when the room dimmed and the nurses finished their final rounds, I pulled out the folder I'd hidden in my bag. I slipped the letter inside it, behind the receipts and utility bills and signed checks. I wrote evidence on the front in red ink. I sat up in the hospital bed even though every muscle begged me to lie down. My hand trembled as I held the pen, but it wasn't fear. It was resolve. The next morning, when a nurse offered to call someone to pick me up, I gave her Marvin Rehnquist's number. He lived 2 houses down from my rental, retired, kept to himself, but he was the one who'd screamed loud enough that someone heard. When he arrived, he didn't say much, just helped me into the passenger seat and waited until I buckled in. On the drive home, he glanced over once. "You don't need to explain anything," he said. I nodded, the letter heavy in my lap. Back at my apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The place was quiet, safe for now, but I could still feel the echo of Vera's voice in my ear, still see the fury in Daniel's eyes. I opened my laptop and made a new folder titled "They Won't Win." Inside, I scanned every receipt, every document, every bruise photographed and labeled by date. I saved the hospital report. I saved the audio file of the nurse confirming I'd named my attacker. And last, I added a photo of Dad's letter. I wasn't just collecting paper. I was building a case. This wasn't over. Not even close. It was a Thursday morning when they discharged me. I remember because the sky outside the hospital windows had the same pale, washed-out look it did the day we buried Dad, flat, indecisive, like it couldn't commit to sun or rain. Marvin pulled up to the entrance in his old Navy pickup. It made a sound like something was rattling inside the engine, but it still ran smooth. When I stepped out of the automatic doors, he didn't say anything, just nodded once, waited for me to get in, then shifted into drive without a word. I held the manila envelope on my lap like it might come to life. Inside, Dad's letter was folded neatly behind every bill, receipt, and photo I had managed to gather over the past year. If they ever tried to deny my part in that house again, I'd show them every page. We drove in silence past the town square, past the community center where Vera had hosted Mom's birthday last fall, where I was asked to help in the kitchen while everyone else smiled for photos. It was funny, the memories came back in fragments, but now they felt sharper, less blurry, like I'd finally stopped convincing myself I was overreacting. Back at my apartment, Marvin helped me up the stairs and left after handing me a small paper bag from the gas station. Inside was a bottle of orange juice and a protein bar. "You need to eat," he said simply. "Thanks," I whispered, but he was already halfway back down the stairs. I didn't eat. Not yet. I couldn't. Instead, I sat on my bed, legs folded underneath me, and stared at the envelope for another 10 minutes. Then I picked it up and headed out again. The Springfield Legal Aid office was housed in a red brick building off Main, just past the old movie theater. It smelled like coffee, dust, and printer toner. A young woman with tight curls and calm eyes called my name and led me to her office. Her name was Ava. Her voice was steady but kind, the kind that told me she didn't just do this for a paycheck. We sat down. I handed her the folder. She opened it, glanced at the first few documents, and then paused. How old were you when you signed this mortgage agreement? She asked, tilting the paper toward the window light. 17, just a few months before my birthday. Her eyebrows lifted. Was there a guardian cosigner? No, just my brother and his wife. They said it was just a formality, that we had to show unity to keep the house. She placed the paper down and folded her hands. Talia, this isn't enforceable. Not legally. You were a minor. That alone could invalidate the entire mortgage transfer, especially if there's evidence of coercion. For a second, I couldn't speak. The relief came slow, but so did the fury. I had lived for years thinking I was wrong, that I had overstepped, that I had signed away my place in my family's home because I was too naive to know better. And now, with a few sentences and a legal precedent, this woman had given me back what Vera had spent years trying to erase: power. I want to fight it, I said, voice tight. Ava nodded. Then let's start. Over the next hour, we went through everything: the medical records from the ER, the photos of bruises taken by the nurse, the original emails from Daniel asking me to trust Vera with the paperwork, and the voice message Vera left when I first hesitated. Talia, don't drag this out. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be. Ava compiled it all into a digital folder labeled Huxley Coercion Case. She asked me to sign a few forms, gave me a timeline, and told me what to expect next. By the time I walked out, the air felt different, heavier, but in a way that meant momentum, not pressure. That evening, back home, I drafted a short email. I kept it simple, direct, professional. Subject line: Notice of legal intent to Daniel Huxley, Vera Langford from Talia Rowan. Date: today's date. I am formally notifying you that I have retained legal representation and intend to challenge the 2012 mortgage deed transfer based on new findings regarding my age and the circumstances under which the documents were signed. I will also be pursuing legal recourse for coercion, physical assault, and defamation. All further communication should be directed to my attorney, T. Rowan. I hit send. It took them 4 hours to reply. Vera, of course. Daniel never handled the hard stuff. Her response was short, condescending: You're making a mistake. You don't want to go public with this, Talia. People will talk. Reputations will suffer, including yours. I stared at the screen. And then, without overthinking, I typed back: You should have thought of that when you erased me. The message bounced back instantly: delivered. Read. That night, I didn't sleep. My body still ached, but that pain had become background noise compared to the fire that had started to burn deeper inside me. I sat by the window, Bible in my lap, the letter tucked between its pages. You deserve this home, not just the building, the space, the memory, the dignity, I whispered to the empty room, the first time I had said it out loud to myself. This time I'm not backing down, not because I needed revenge, not because I wanted to humiliate them, but because the truth wasn't something I owed silence to anymore. I reached for a pen and began organizing everything into folders, both digital and physical, labeled, chronological, cross-referenced. Every scar, every photo, every email, every financial transaction. This wasn't just for court. It was my story, finally written by me. They'd poked the wrong bear, and I knew it. But knowing it and being prepared for what came next were two different things. A few days after I sent the legal notice, life had started to inch back toward routine. I'd returned to my part-time job at the downtown dental office, not because I was fully healed, but because I needed to feel useful again. There's a kind of numbness that creeps in when you stay idle too long, like standing barefoot on cold tile. I was determined not to freeze again. It was Thursday morning. My supervisor, Linda, was waiting by the break room when I walked in. She wasn't the kind to hover. So when she looked up from her coffee and said, "Talia, can I talk to you in my office for a sec?" I felt my stomach knot. The room was quiet when we sat. She clicked something on her laptop and rotated the screen toward me. This came in through the general office email around 2 a.m. last night from an anonymous address. No subject line, just this link. It was a video. I clicked play. There I was on screen, sitting in my bedroom, eyes red, voice shaky. The image quality was grainy, but it was unmistakably me. And the audio, it cut straight to my core. I don't know what's real anymore, my voice said. Maybe I imagined it all. The clip was under 30 seconds. My hands went cold. I knew that footage. I'd recorded it myself months ago on Vera's advice. She had told me it was therapeutic, said, you should document how you feel. It'll help you process things. She even offered to edit it just for clarity. Now here it was, edited, all right. Sliced, twisted, reassembled into something unrecognizable. A weapon. Her weapon. Linda spoke gently. We know you've been through a lot lately, and this seems personal. It's clearly edited, but I had to show it to you. I swallowed, the room tilting slightly. It's from my old phone, a personal recording. Vera had access to it. She nodded slowly. I figured as much. We're not taking any action against you, but I'd suggest laying low for a bit, just until this passes. Passes like a storm. Like food poisoning. I have the original, I said. The unedited one. Would you want to see it? She looked relieved. Yes, if you don't mind. I forwarded it to her right then, and within an hour she had passed it along to HR, who issued a quiet internal memo stating I was not under review and that any defamatory material would be handled legally. They even offered me extended leave with pay and a letter of support if I needed it. That support, unexpected and calm, nearly undid me more than the video itself. Later that day I met with Ava again, my attorney from legal aid. Her reaction was swift and sharp. They're not just trying to shake you, she said. They're trying to destroy your credibility before the court even hears your voice. We filed a motion immediately to include the original footage and metadata in our case. Ava also sent a cease and desist to Vera and Daniel, warning of legal consequences if further defamation occurred. But I wasn't finished yet. That night, I opened my laptop and created a side-by-side comparison. On the left, the manipulated clip, cropped, voice lowered, made to sound unstable. On the right, the full version, 48 minutes of me processing grief, betrayal, confusion, all raw but honest. Then I attached metadata timestamps, the original file history. And one more thing, a screenshot of the message Vera had sent me months ago, just send me the video. I'll clean it up for you. You'll thank me later. I drafted an email to Vera. Subject line, proof of defamation body, you crossed a line. Here's the difference between a woman grieving and a woman gaslit. Attachments, video comparison, metadata report, legal notice, cease and desist. You should know by now, I document everything. Talia. I hit send. 2 days passed. Nothing. Then at 11:47 p.m. on a Saturday night, Vera replied, you've always been dramatic, but fine. You want to go public? Let's play. That was it. No apology, no denial, just another game to her. But something in that message was off. There was no control in it, no veneer, just reaction. She was rattled. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I already had what I needed, and she knew it. Instead, I took that weekend to reorganize my files again. Everything was labeled, timestamped, backed up to 3 different cloud accounts. I had a printed copy of every document in a fireproof box under my bed. I wasn't just fighting for my name. I was protecting my history. Because if there was one thing I had learned from Vera, it was that silence isn't safety. It's a setup. And this time I wasn't playing defense. I wasn't expecting it to be a fundraiser, not for something my father believed in. When I pulled into the lot behind the community rec hall that Saturday morning, the place already buzzed with folding tables, crockpots, and PTA energy. Homemade banners read, "Preserve our homes, protect Springfield generations," and I recognized a few faces from our old church, people who used to eat at our dinner table. I hadn't known about the event until 2 days earlier when Mary Ann, a woman who once taught Sunday school with my mother, called out of the blue. "I assume you'll be there Saturday," she said brightly. "Vera told me you'd be helping coordinate." I paused. Vera hadn't said a word to me. She tisked. "Well, that's odd. It's honoring families who built the city's older neighborhoods. Your daddy practically laid those bricks with his bare hands. You should be in front, not the back." So I showed up, not to be petty, not to cause a scene, but because it was my story too. That house, our house, wasn't just a line item on Vera's real estate portfolio. Inside the hall, the air smelled like slow-cooked beans and ambition. At the welcome table, a teenager barely old enough to vote handed me a name badge. To Rohan, volunteer staff, it read in bubble letters. I stared at it. "Excuse me," I said gently. "It's Rowan with an E, and I'm not staff." The girl blinked. "This was on the list Ms. Langford gave us, but I can fix it." She reached for a Sharpie and scribbled over the mistake, awkwardly correcting the letters like a patch job on a leaky pipe, then handed it back with a weak smile. I pinned it on anyway, not because I accepted it, but because I wanted to be seen, even if they couldn't get my name right. As I moved through the crowd, people smiled politely. A few hugged me. Some averted their eyes. The small talk was careful: weather, casseroles, the mayor's traffic plan. No one mentioned the court notice or the video or the fact that I had a bruised cheek that makeup didn't quite cover. At the front, Dara stood near the podium like it belonged to her. She wore navy, understated but expensive, and her voice carried smoothly across the room as she welcomed everyone. "This community," she said, "is rooted in strength, in family, in legacy. It's about protecting what our parents built and making sure our children don't have to start from scratch." She name-dropped Daniel, called him a devoted son, tirelessly maintaining the home their father left behind. She said nothing about me, not once, not even as she pointed to the projection screen where photos rotated in slow motion. There was Dad waving in front of the porch he built. There was Daniel digging up the side yard. There was Vera smiling in the kitchen. No Talia. I leaned against the wall near the exits and counted the seconds between applause. At some point, I slipped into the restroom and stared at my reflection. The name badge caught my eye again: T. Rohan, volunteer staff. Wrong name. Wrong role. I peeled it off and stuck it in my purse. After the speeches, I helped clean up, mostly because no one stopped me. I cleared half-used napkins, tossed empty cups, and tried not to listen as Vera chatted with the mayor about future zoning meetings. Then I heard the sound of sneakers running across linoleum. A small voice: "Auntie Talia." It was Emma, Daniel's youngest, 6, maybe 7 now. She had a piece of paper clutched in her hand, covered in crayon marks and stickers. "I drew you something," she said proudly. "Look." She handed me the drawing. It was a house, big square, triangle roof, crooked window panes drawn with love. Inside were 3 stick figures labeled Dad, Mom, and me. Outside, near a little blob that looked like a tree, was another stick figure, smaller, arms up, a smiley face labeled Auntie. "In the tree?" I asked softly. Emma nodded. "You said you don't live in the house anymore, so I put your spot there under the tree." "That's your place now." My throat clenched. I blinked quickly and smiled. "It's perfect, honey." "I love it." She beamed and hugged my legs before running off again, oblivious to the iceberg she'd cracked inside me. I folded the drawing carefully and tucked it beside the badge in my bag. That night, after driving home in silence, I parked the car and sat there in the dark, engine ticking. I didn't want to move, but eventually I went inside, changed into an old hoodie, and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. New document title: When You're Erased by Family. I stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then I started typing. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't even a personal essay. It was a statement. I wrote about what it feels like to sit through a memorial where no one says your name, about standing in the home you helped pay for while being called extra, about being cropped out of pictures, family texts, invitations. I wrote it all. I didn't sign it, not yet, but I saved it. Afterward, I pulled out the corkboard I'd hidden under my bed, used to be where I pinned holiday cards and reminders. Now it had a new purpose. I laid it flat and started building. I pinned the name tag, the child's drawing, a printout of Vera's email: "You don't want to go public with this," my court notice, photos from the fundraiser, me blurred in the background, just barely visible behind someone else's elbow. This wasn't a collection of pain anymore. It was evidence. It was strategy. And as I stared at that board, something inside me shifted. "I'm not fighting for revenge," I whispered. "I'm fighting to be seen." The morning after the fundraiser, I was sipping reheated coffee and sorting through an envelope of return mail when my phone buzzed across the counter. It was a text from Amanda, someone I hadn't spoken to in years but who used to sing next to me in the church choir. No greeting, just a link. Have you seen this? I clicked it. An anonymous Facebook page, no profile photo, had posted a new video. The title read, "Greedy Sister Tries to Steal Family Home After Father's Death." My stomach clenched. My face filled the frame mid-sentence. Maybe I imagined it all. The caption underneath read, "Talia Rowan finally admits to fabricating abuse claims to gain ownership of the family house." I couldn't move for a second, just stared. They had used the therapy clip again, this time with narration, my voice manipulated, my image blurred just enough to look unsettling. It was crafted with intent, designed to dismantle my credibility. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not embarrassment, not even shock anymore. Anger. Clean, controlled. The kind of anger that gives you clarity. I didn't respond publicly, not yet, not there. By late afternoon, while I was still reviewing every frame, every audio splice, every calculated pause in that video, there was a knock at the door. Marvin. He didn't say hello, just handed me a flash drive in a tiny plastic case, nodded once, and turned to leave. Before he reached the steps, he paused and said, "You might want headphones." I shut the door, slid the drive into my laptop, and opened the file labeled backyard_audio_final.wave. At first I heard nothing but birds and wind. Then, faintly, voices. Daniel's voice, sharp, familiar. "She's always been the weakest link." Vera responded, cool as ever, "Once she signs, we sell it. She's disposable." I froze. The audio was clear, date-stamped, recorded just 2 weeks before the incident in the kitchen. Marvin had caught it from his back porch. He lived just 2 lots over. He had heard enough to start recording because, in his words, something felt off. I called Ava immediately. "This isn't just slander," she said after listening. "This is premeditated fraud, and it proves everything we've been trying to show." We filed a motion that afternoon to enter the audio into evidence. Ava began subpoenaing all bank transfers, title changes, property tax filings, anything with Daniel or Vera's names on them from the past 2 years. That night, while the house settled around me in quiet creaks and sighs, I sent one final message to Sam, a local journalist I'd known from my college writing classes. He ran a column on civic accountability and small-town corruption. "I don't want sympathy," I told him. "I just want the truth out." We met the next morning over coffee. I gave him everything, the audio, the bruises, the hospital report, the emails, the deed transfer history. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I let the evidence speak. He asked one question before he left, "Are you ready for what this might bring?" I was. 2 days later, the article published. Headline, "When Home Becomes Hostile, a sister's fight for the house her father built." Within 12 hours, the anonymous Facebook page deleted the original video. I didn't know most of the names, but their words made something shift inside me, like my spine straightened a little without me realizing it. By evening, I had voicemails from 3 women's groups asking me to speak at upcoming panels on financial abuse and coercive control within families. I saved them all but hadn't called back yet. Then came Daniel's message. It arrived at 2:16 a.m. His voice slurred, heavy with what I guessed was liquor and shame. "You ruined us, Talia," he said, breathing hard between words. "You turned everyone against us. They think we're monsters." I didn't flinch. I didn't even feel sad. I hit delete. Vera, on the other hand, didn't call, didn't text. She just disappeared. Her Facebook account went blank. Her Instagram bio vanished. I heard from someone at the city planning board that her name had been quietly removed from the next housing committee meeting. No announcement, no explanation. She was going dark, which meant one of 2 things: she was regrouping or she was unraveling. Either way, I was prepared. I didn't celebrate. I didn't buy champagne or post some victorious quote on social media. I just opened my corkboard and added a new line of red thread connecting the audio transcript to the article to the court motion. This wasn't over, but now they were playing defense. It started like any other morning, but I knew this day was different the second I pulled my hair back and saw the thin-healed scar near my eyebrow, the one I stopped covering weeks ago. I let it show in the mirror. My reflection wasn't polished, no mascara, no earrings, just a simple navy dress, plain but intentional. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to finish what they started. Downstairs, Marvin was waiting in his truck, engine idling. He didn't honk, didn't text, just sat there with his hands on the wheel like he had all the time in the world. When I stepped outside, he glanced at me once, nodded, and reached over to open the passenger door. I climbed in. Before we pulled off, he placed his hand briefly on my shoulder. "You already won when you didn't stay silent," he said. I didn't say anything. I just let his words sit there like an anchor. The drive to the courthouse took 15 minutes. I stared out the window most of the way. Springfield looked the same, people watering lawns, dogs chasing birds, someone pressure washing their driveway like justice wasn't on trial across town. We pulled into the side lot. My stomach tightened when I saw Daniel's car already parked. Inside the building, the air had that overchilled government office feel, sharp, dry. Ava met me near security. Her hair pulled back tighter than usual, a leather folder tucked under her arm. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." In the courtroom, the space felt both too big and too small. Rows of pew-like benches lined the back, already filling with curious faces, neighbors, maybe a few reporters. I spotted someone from the newspaper who had written the first article. He gave me a soft nod. I returned it. Daniel and Vera sat at the defense table. He looked worse than I remembered, drawn, jittery, eyes darting around like he was waiting for someone else to speak for him. Vera, by contrast, was composed, her expression carved from stone. When the judge entered, we all stood, then sat. Then it began. Ava opened calmly, laying out the facts, the mortgage documents I signed as a minor, the history of coercion, the documented abuse, the doctored videos, the fraudulent attempts to transfer ownership of the house. She spoke without flair, just facts. Her voice didn't tremble once. When Vera's attorney stood, the mood shifted. He called me unstable, accused me of having a long history of emotional fragility, and claimed that I had fabricated the abuse because I was jealous of Vera's role in the family. That one made me laugh softly. The court clerk glanced up, startled. I didn't apologize. The judge listened, stone-faced. Then came the audio. Ava pressed play. It was crackly at first, outdoor wind, a bird, and then clear as a bell. "Daniel, she's always been the weakest link. Vera, once she signs, we sell it. She's disposable." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone gasped. I didn't look at them. I watched Vera. Her jaw flexed, barely, but she didn't blink. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Langford," he said. "Is that your voice?" She said nothing. "Ms. Langford." Still nothing. The silence rang louder than the tape ever could. Next came Daniel's turn. He was sworn in, and for a moment I almost thought he might try to lie. But his voice cracked before he even answered the first question. When the judge asked, "When you confronted your sister at the house, did you lay hands on her?" Daniel shifted in the seat. I was overwhelmed. "I didn't mean to hurt her, but..." "You did." He nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "And did you witness Mrs. Langford instruct you to end her, as captured in the audio testimony?" Daniel looked down at his shoes. "Yes. And that was it. We recessed for an hour. I sat outside on a bench with Ava, sipping from a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The courthouse steps were filled with quiet anticipation, people whispering, a reporter jotting notes. When we returned, the judge didn't waste time. "In the matter of Rowan versus Huxley and Langford," he began. "This court finds the original mortgage agreement to be invalid, as it was signed by a legal minor without guardian consent." He paused. The courtroom held its breath. Furthermore, this court acknowledges evidence of coercion, defamation, and physical abuse. Mr. Huxley is hereby sentenced to 100 hours of community service, a 1-year suspended sentence, and mandatory therapy. He is also issued a restraining order from Ms. Rowan for no less than 5 years. Daniel didn't move. As for Mrs. Langford, the judge continued, this court finds her guilty of civil fraud. She is ordered to pay restitution, fined heavily, and barred from claiming any ownership over the property in question. The deed shall be restored in full to Ms. Rowan's name, effective immediately. The sound in my ears dulled, not from shock, more from the strange stillness that came over me. My hands rested quietly in my lap. I didn't cry, not when Daniel looked at me like a stranger, not when Vera refused to even glance in my direction, not even when the gavel struck once, sharp and final. Outside, the sky was warm and soft. Reporters waited with microphones, questions half-formed. I kept walking. On the sidewalk, a young woman touched my elbow gently. She was maybe 20, a college student by the look of her. She handed me a small envelope. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me I'm not weak." I nodded, walked away. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note, "My sister took everything from me too. Maybe now I can start fighting back." Justice was done, but healing would take its own time. A full month had passed since the verdict. But the truth is, time didn't fix everything. It didn't smooth the edges of old wounds or silence the echoes of voices I still heard in my sleep. But it gave me something else, space. And that space, I was learning, was a beginning. It was early morning when I returned to the house, not for paperwork or meetings or court, but for me. I parked at the curb and walked the familiar path up to the porch, the same boards Dad and I had stained together one summer when I was 13. I remember sanding the corners, paintbrush in hand, while he talked about integrity like it was a physical thing you could measure. "You don't cut corners," he said, "even if nobody's watching, especially then." I stepped onto the porch and ran my fingers across the wood grain. The scent of old cedar still clung to the steps. A quiet creak sounded as I pushed open the door. Vera was inside. She didn't look up right away. She was packing the last of her things into a rolling suitcase, neat rows of clothing already folded. A potted plant sat next to the entryway, leaves drooping. She had always liked appearances, even in her exit. I didn't gloat, didn't raise my voice. I walked in calmly, the floorboards beneath me groaning like they remembered who built them. She glanced at me once. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were hollow, resigned. "You wanted me gone," I said softly, standing in the hallway between us. "But this was never yours." She didn't argue. She didn't say a word, just zipped the bag, pulled it upright, and rolled it toward the door. The sound of that suitcase rolling across the hardwood felt louder than it should have. The door closed behind her with a quiet final click. I stood there in the empty house for several long minutes. The silence wasn't lonely. It was sacred and heavy, but this time it was mine to carry. I stepped into the living room and looked around at the empty walls. The space still smelled like lemon oil and dust, the scent of my father's hands. I closed my eyes and whispered to the room, "Dad, I brought it back. I kept my word." Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the small cassette recorder I'd found months earlier, tucked inside an old box of his things. I hadn't played it in a long time. I clicked the worn button and let his voice fill the room, grainy, but certain. "Talia is the only one who stayed," he said. "She understands this house is built from more than nails." I pressed my hand to my chest and let that moment sit in my bones. Later that week, I started repainting the walls. I didn't choose stark white. I chose soft ivory, the same shade my mother painted after Dad passed. It felt honest, restorative, like I wasn't erasing the past, just refreshing it. I hung one frame in the front hallway, a photo of me at 6, barefoot on the porch swing, my hair a mess, laughing at something Dad had said off camera. Next to it, I pinned a small note I'd found in his toolbox months ago. The handwriting crooked but unmistakable, "This house is yours, Tally." I didn't cry. I smiled, a small one, the kind that sits in your chest and stretches out slowly. Not long after that, I got a call from the local women's center. They'd read the article, heard about the case, and wanted to know if I'd be willing to lead a writing workshop for women who had experienced family betrayal, abuse, legal intimidation, erasure. I didn't answer right away. I sat with the idea, then I said yes. The first session was on a rainy Tuesday evening. The room smelled like wet jackets and coffee. There were 5 women, different ages, different histories, but their eyes carried the same weight I'd worn for years. I read aloud the letter I had once written but never published, the one I'd titled "When You're Erased by Family." No one clapped. No one needed to. Some cried, some nodded. One woman whispered, "That's how I feel too." After the session, one of them hugged me and said, "You didn't just survive. You made space for us." Those words stayed with me. The next weekend, I bought a new porch light fixture, simple, warm, not too bright. As I climbed the ladder to install it, Marvin walked over from next door carrying a small pot of lavender. "I thought your steps needed something real," he said. I took it from him with a smile. "Thank you for everything." Before he walked away, he pointed at the porch post. "Glad you're still here." That afternoon, as I swept the front porch, Emma, my niece, the one who once drew me under a tree in the rain, came running up the steps. She stopped, catching her breath, and said, "Can I come visit sometimes?" I crouched to meet her eyes and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "Only if you draw me inside next time." She grinned. That evening, I sat on the porch swing with a mug of tea, the new light casting a soft glow across the front steps. The house still creaked at night, the wind still pushed against the windows like it had something to say. And I listened, because this house carries ghosts, yes, but now it also carries proof that I was never the ghost. I was the root. And I am still here. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people who were supposed to protect us. But standing up, speaking out, can be the most powerful way to reclaim what was taken.